"Get out of here now," shouted the owner of a failing grocery store as he threw out a widow with 2 children who was begging for expired food. The next day he was paralyzed when he saw what the woman had done in his establishment. Night fell heavily over the small grocery store, bringing with it the characteristic silence of the neighborhood's deserted streets. Raymond was sitting behind the worn wooden counter, his trembling hands handling the few crumpled notes that represented the day's earnings. Each bill that passed through his fingers seemed to weigh more than it should, carrying with it the memory of overdue bills, impatient suppliers, and the bank that threatened to take everything. He was a middle-aged man with gray hair beginning to dominate his temples, deep wrinkles marking the tanned face of someone who had spent his entire life working under the sun. His brown eyes, once bright and full of hope, now carried a shadow of tiredness and worry that seemed never to go away. Sweat ran down his forehead, even with the old fan spinning on the ceiling, making an annoying noise that echoed through the almost empty establishment. It won't be enough to pay even half the bills this month, he thought, feeling the familiar tightness in his chest that came every time he looked at the numbers. Evelyn was at the back of the store, between shelves that displayed few products spread out spaciously, trying to create an illusion of abundance where there was only scarcity. She was a woman in her 40s, still beautiful despite the visible fatigue on her delicate face. Her brown hair was tied in a simple ponytail, some rebellious strands falling over her sweaty forehead. She wore a faded floral blouse and worn jeans, clothes that had seen better days, just like the grocery store itself. Her movements were careful as she arranged cans of tomato sauce, boxes of pasta, and packages of rice, trying to make the shelves look less empty than they really were. From time to time, she looked in her husband's direction and saw the tension in his hunched shoulders, the way he repeatedly ran his hand over his face, the way he sighed deeply before counting each bill. Her heart ached to see him like this, but she always tried to stay optimistic, even when it seemed impossible. "It will get better, love. It always does," she said with a forced smile, turning to face him. Raymond raised his eyes from the notes and looked at his wife, trying to return her smile but couldn't. Worry weighed too heavily on his chest. He knew Evelyn was trying to cheer him up, as she always did, but this time things were different. The debts had reached an unsustainable point. The bank had sent the final notification the previous week, giving a deadline for the settlement of debts or the grocery store would be seized. 25 years of hard work, of waking up before sunrise and sleeping after midnight, all of this could disappear in a matter of days. He opened his mouth to respond with something, anything that could reassure her, but the words didn't come out. What could he say? That everything was fine when it clearly wasn't, that they would overcome it when he had no idea how. He closed his eyes for a moment, breathing deeply, smelling the familiar scent of cleaning products mixed with the aroma of overripe fruits. "I don't know what to do anymore, Evelyn," he thought, but didn't say out loud. Evelyn noticed the sadness in her husband's eyes and felt a pang of pain in her chest. She had known this man for more than 20 years, had seen him build this grocery store from scratch, transforming a small rented space into a business that had supported the family for decades. He had always been a strong, determined man who never gave up in the face of obstacles. But in recent months, she had seen that strength slowly draining away, replaced by a deep exhaustion that seemed to corrode his soul. She dropped the can she was holding on the shelf and began to walk toward the counter, slow steps on the cracked ceramic floor. She wanted to hug him, to tell him that together they would find a solution, that no matter how difficult the situation was, they always had each other. But halfway there, something strange happened. A sudden dizziness took over her, making the world around her spin violently. "What's happening?" she thought, confused. Evelyn stopped in the middle of the corridor, instinctively bringing her hand to her head. The dizziness was getting stronger, now accompanied by a sharp pain that seemed to pulse inside her skull, as if something was hammering from the inside. She blinked several times, trying to focus her vision that was becoming blurry, but it didn't help. The shelves around her seemed to move, undulating as if they were made of water. Her legs began to weaken, her knees losing the strength they had always had. She tried to lean on one of the shelves, but her fingers slipped on the metal surface. Her heart raced in her chest, beating so hard that she could feel the pulsations echoing in her ears. A cold sweat covered her entire body in a matter of seconds. She opened her mouth to call Raymond, to ask for help, but only a weak moan escaped her lips. "Raymond," she managed to whisper, but her voice was so low that she herself could barely hear it. Raymond was looking at the notes when he noticed Evelyn's strange movement from the corner of his eye. He quickly raised his head, and what he saw made his blood freeze. Evelyn was standing in the middle of the hallway, hand on her head, her body staggering from side to side as if she were about to fall. Her face, previously flushed from the night's heat, was pale, almost white, and her eyes were wide open in an expression of pure terror. For a fraction of a second, Raymond was paralyzed, his brain refusing to process what he was seeing. But then instinct took over. He dropped the notes that fell scattered across the counter and jumped from his chair with a speed he hadn't shown in years. His legs moved on their own, running toward his wife, his heart hammering in his chest so hard it hurt. "Evelyn!" he shouted, his voice laden with desperation. But it was too late. Before Raymond could reach her, Evelyn completely lost her balance. Her body collapsed between the shelves, falling heavily onto the ceramic floor. Some cans rolled off the shelves with the impact, falling around her with metallic crashes that seemed amplified in the silence of the night. Raymond reached her in seconds, throwing himself on his knees beside her, his hands trembling while trying to touch her. Evelyn was lying on her side, eyes closed, completely motionless. He carefully turned her over, supporting her head on his lap, and that's when he saw that she wasn't moving. Nothing, not a muscle, not a visible breath. Panic took over him like a giant wave, suffocating and absolute. "Evelyn! Evelyn, look at me! Open your eyes!" he shouted, gently shaking her shoulders. Raymond's hands were trembling so much that he could barely hold her properly. He put his ear to her chest, trying to hear her heartbeat, but his own heart was beating so loudly in his ears that it was impossible to hear anything else. He moved his face away a bit and looked at her. At that face he loved more than anything in the world, now pale and lifeless. Tears began to blur his vision, but he quickly wiped them away with the back of his hand, trying to maintain control, trying to think about what to do. He tried calling her again, his voice overcome with desperation. But Evelyn didn't react. Her arms fell limp at her sides when he released her for a moment. She was completely unconscious, and Raymond felt a terror he had never experienced in his life take over every cell in his body. "No, no, no, this can't be happening," he thought, his mind spinning in chaotic circles. Raymond finally managed to force himself to act. With hands still uncontrollably shaking, he reached into his pants pocket and pulled out the old cell phone. His fingers were so trembling that he entered the wrong unlock code twice before managing to open it. Tears were streaming down his face now, wetting his shirt already soaked with sweat. He dialed the ambulance number and brought the device to his ear with such force that it hurt. Each second of waiting seemed like an eternity. He looked at Evelyn while waiting for someone to answer, studying every detail of her face, desperately searching for some sign of movement, of breathing, of life. Finally, after what seemed like hours but were only a few seconds, a calm female voice answered on the other end. But Raymond wasn't calm. He was on the verge of collapse. "My wife fainted. She's not waking up. For God's sake, send an ambulance now," he shouted into the phone, his voice broken and desperate. The attendant on the other end of the line tried to calm him down, speaking in that professional and controlled tone that people trained for emergencies use. She asked questions that Raymond could barely process. He answered automatically, giving the address of the grocery store, describing what had happened, trying to explain that Evelyn had fallen and wasn't responding to anything. The woman on the phone said something about sending help immediately, about keeping him calm, about checking if Evelyn was breathing. Raymond took the phone away from his ear for a second and leaned over his wife again, observing her chest with desperate attention. Was there movement? He wasn't sure. It was so subtle that he couldn't tell if it was breathing or just his desperate imagination creating what he wanted to see. He placed his trembling hand on her chest, trying to feel something. I don't know. I can't feel anything," he said on the phone, his voice breaking into a sob. The operator continued speaking, giving instructions that Raymond tried to follow, but his mind was so consumed by panic that the words seemed to make no sense. She said something about placing her in a specific position, about not moving her too much, about staying by her side until the ambulance arrived. Raymond did what he could, adjusting Evelyn with the utmost care, supporting her head in a position that the woman on the phone had described. He put the cell phone down beside him, keeping the speakerphone on while holding Evelyn's hand with both of his hands. Her hand was cold, very cold. When had it become so cold? He rubbed her hand between his, trying to warm it, trying to bring some sign of life back to that inert body. The tears kept falling, wetting both their hands. He leaned down and kissed her forehead, whispering between sobs. "Hang on, love. The ambulance is coming, please hang on, don't leave me," he said, his voice choked. The minutes that followed were the longest of Raymond's life. He remained there, kneeling on the cold floor of the grocery store, holding his unconscious wife, feeling time pass with torturous slowness. Each second seemed to drag on for an eternity. He looked at her face constantly, searching for any change, any sign that she was coming back. But there was nothing. Evelyn remained motionless, pale, silent. Raymond had never felt so powerless in his life. He was a man accustomed to solving problems, to working hard to overcome obstacles. But now there was nothing he could do. All that remained was to wait and pray. And he prayed. For the first time in years, Raymond prayed with an intensity that came from deep within his soul. He wasn't a particularly religious man, but in that moment, with the life of the woman he loved hanging by a thread, he prayed as he had never prayed before. "Please, God, please don't take her from me. I'll do anything." Anything, he thought, squeezing Evelyn's cold hand. Finally, after what seemed like hours but was perhaps 5 or 6 minutes, Raymond heard the sound he had been desperately waiting for. The ambulance siren cut through the silence of the night, approaching rapidly. The sound grew louder, closer, until it stopped right in front of the grocery store. Raymond heard doors opening, quick footsteps, voices shouting commands. He didn't move, couldn't move, continued to stay there holding Evelyn, until 2 figures dressed in uniforms came running through the grocery store door that he had left open. They were 2 paramedics, a tall man and a woman with short hair, both carrying equipment. They ran to where Raymond was, assessing the situation in seconds with professional and experienced eyes. The man knelt on the other side of Evelyn, while the woman began taking equipment out of a large bag. "What happened?" asked the paramedic, already placing his fingers on Evelyn's neck to check her pulse. Raymond tried to answer, but his voice came out jumbled, words mixing with sobs. He quickly wiped his face and tried again, forcing himself to speak clearly. The man needed to know what had happened to help her. He described everything quickly. How Evelyn was organizing the shelves, how she had suddenly stopped and brought her hand to her head, how she had staggered and fallen, how she hadn't been responding to anything since then. The paramedics listened while they worked, their hands moving with practiced efficiency. The woman placed an oxygen mask on Evelyn's face while the man checked her vital signs. They exchanged quick glances with each other, that kind of silent communication that emergency professionals develop. Raymond saw their expressions, and his heart sank even further. He knew that look. It was the look of someone seeing something very wrong. "She's going to be all right, isn't she? Please tell me she's going to be all right," he said, his voice desperate. The female paramedic didn't respond immediately. She was busy connecting some wires to a small device, placing sensors on Evelyn's chest under her blouse. The man finally looked at Raymond, and there was a seriousness in his face that made Raymond's stomach turn. But he kept his voice calm and professional. "We need to take her to the hospital immediately. You can come with us in the ambulance," said the paramedic, already gesturing for his colleague to bring the stretcher that had been left at the entrance. Raymond nodded quickly, moving back a little to give them space to work. He watched as they placed Evelyn on the stretcher with movements that were quick but careful, securing her with straps, adjusting the oxygen mask. Everything happened very quickly. In less than a minute they were lifting the stretcher and running toward the ambulance. Raymond followed them, stumbling over his own feet, completely forgetting to lock the grocery store to grab anything, thinking only of not losing sight of Evelyn. The journey to the hospital was a blur of sirens, flashing lights and silent prayers. Raymond sat on a small bench inside the ambulance, pressed against the wall, watching the paramedics work on Evelyn. They spoke to each other using medical terms he didn't understand, checking numbers on devices, adjusting equipment. The woman held a bag connected to the oxygen mask, squeezing it in a steady rhythm. The man was monitoring something on a small screen, eyes fixed on the flashing numbers and lines. Raymond tried to ask what was happening, but his voice was swallowed by the noise of the siren and the engine. So he just sat there, hands clasped between his knees, body swaying with the movements of the ambulance, eyes fixed on Evelyn's pale face. She looked so small there, so fragile, so different from the strong woman he knew. "Hang on, my love. Please hang on," he thought once more. The ambulance finally stopped with a sharp brake that threw Raymond forward. The rear doors opened immediately, and more people in white appeared, pulling the stretcher out. Raymond jumped out of the ambulance and tried to keep up, but a nurse gently held him by the arm, preventing him from following. He saw Evelyn being rushed through automatic double doors, disappearing into a corridor full of blinding fluorescent lights. The doors closed in his face with a final sound, and he stood there lost in the middle of the emergency entrance, not knowing what to do. The nurse who had held him was saying something about filling out papers, about providing information, but Raymond could barely hear her. All he could think about was that Evelyn had disappeared behind those doors, and he didn't know if he would ever see her alive again. "Sir, are you listening to me?" asked the nurse, gently squeezing his arm to get his attention. Raymond blinked and looked at the woman for the first time. She was young, probably about 30, with dark hair tied in a bun and kind eyes that seemed accustomed to dealing with people in despair. She repeated the question, more slowly this time, and Raymond finally nodded. She guided him to a counter where another staff member waited with a clipboard and a pen. The questions began. Patient's full name, age, address, health insurance, medical history. Raymond answered everything mechanically, his voice monotone while his mind was completely focused on the doors through which Evelyn had disappeared. He had no insurance. They hadn't had money for that for years. It would be public health care. The woman noted everything without comment, her face professional and neutral. When she finished, she pointed to a waiting area with blue plastic chairs. "You can wait there. As soon as we have news, someone will come talk to you," she said, already turning to attend to someone else. Raymond walked to the waiting area like a zombie. He let himself fall into one of the uncomfortable chairs, his body finally giving in to the weight of exhaustion and shock. Around him, other people waited. An elderly woman with a persistent cough, a man with a bandaged hand, a young pregnant woman accompanied by her husband. Everyone seemed lost in their own personal dramas. The clock on the wall showed almost 10 at night. The fluorescent lighting was too bright, almost aggressive, making Raymond's eyes burn. He ran his hands over his face, feeling the roughness of his unshaven beard, the oily skin of sweat and dried tears. He should be doing something, anything, but he didn't know what. Call someone. They had no close family. Some distant cousins, acquaintances, but no one really intimate. It had always been just him and Evelyn against the world. And now I might lose her, he thought, feeling the tears threaten to return. Time dragged on with unbearable slowness. Raymond sat there, eyes fixed on the double doors, waiting for someone to come out with news. Each time the doors opened and someone in white appeared, he straightened in his chair, heart racing, hoping to be called. But the doctors and nurses walked right past, calling other names, taking other people. No one came to talk to him. 15 minutes passed, then 20, then half an hour. Raymond looked at the clock obsessively, watching the hands move with torturous slowness. He tried to imagine what was happening in there. They were examining Evelyn, running tests, treating her. Had she woken up? Was she conscious? The possibilities swirled in his mind, each more frightening than the last. He couldn't stay still. He stood up and began pacing back and forth across the waiting room, hands in his pockets, then behind his back, then running through his hair. How much longer? He thought, looking at the doors once again. Finally, after almost an hour of agonizing waiting, Raymond couldn't take it anymore. He looked at the double doors separating the waiting room from the emergency area and felt something inside him break. He could no longer sit there, waiting passively while Evelyn was on the other side, perhaps fighting for her life, perhaps needing him. He rose from the blue plastic chair, legs trembling but determined, and began walking toward the doors. His heart pounded hard in his chest, not from fear, but from the urgent need to see his wife, to be by her side, to hold her hand and tell her he was there. He knew it wasn't allowed. He knew security guards or nurses would probably stop him. But he no longer cared about rules or protocols. Evelyn was his wife, his companion of more than 20 years, and he had the right to be with her. I need to see her. No matter what they say, I need to see her, he thought, quickening his pace. Raymond pushed the double doors with both hands, and they opened with a pneumatic hiss. He entered a long white corridor, illuminated by fluorescent lights, even brighter than those in the waiting room. The smell of disinfectant was strong, almost suffocating, mixed with something metallic that he couldn't identify. There were stretchers against the walls, some empty, others with patients covered by white sheets. Nurses and doctors walked back and forth, some running, others walking quickly with clipboards in hand. No one paid attention to him in the first few seconds. Raymond took advantage and began walking down the corridor, looking into every partially open door, desperately searching for Evelyn. His heart raced every time he saw a woman lying on a stretcher, but none of them was her. He passed a room where a child was crying while a doctor examined his arm. He passed another, where an elderly man was coughing violently. "Where are you, Evelyn? Where?" he thought, turning into another corridor. That's when he heard it. A sound that made his blood freeze in his veins. It was a sharp, continuous alarm coming from somewhere ahead. He knew that sound. He had heard it in movies, in television series. It was the sound of a heart monitor when the heart stopped beating. The flatline, the deadly beep. Raymond felt his legs move on their own, running now toward the sound. He turned a corner and saw an open door with bright light coming from inside. There was movement in there, people running, voices shouting urgent commands. He ran to the door and stopped at the threshold, his eyes widening at what he saw. It was Evelyn. His wife was lying on a high stretcher in the center of the room, surrounded by 4 or 5 people in white coats. Her body was motionless, arms fallen to the sides. Her blouse had been cut, exposing her chest where sensors were attached. And above her, attached to a support, a monitor showed a flat line. "No, Evelyn," shouted Raymond, trying to enter the room. A nurse who was near the door turned quickly and saw him. She was a robust woman of about 50, with grey hair tied in a tight bun. Her eyes widened when she saw Raymond standing there, and she immediately dropped what she was doing to run to him. "Sir, you cannot be here. Leave now," she said in a firm voice, pushing him gently but determinedly out of the room. Raymond resisted, trying to look over her shoulder, trying to see what was happening to Evelyn. He saw a tall doctor holding 2 devices that looked like metallic tennis rackets. He saw when the doctor applied the shock. Evelyn's body reacted slightly, and everyone in the room held their breath, waiting for a sign of life. The monitor continued showing the flat line. "Evelyn, let me in! She's my wife!" shouted Raymond, trying to break free from the nurse's grip. The nurse was stronger than she looked. She managed to push Raymond completely out of the room and positioned herself in front of the door, blocking his view. But he could still hear everything. He heard the tense voices of the doctors inside, the rapid commands being given. The sound of medical equipment filled the room while the team did everything they could to bring her back. The doctors continued the resuscitation procedure while everyone watched in silence, waiting for a sign of recovery. Raymond held the nurse's shoulders, fingers pressing hard, pleading eyes fixed on her face. "Please let me see her. Please. I'm begging you," he said, his voice breaking in desperation. The nurse looked at him with a mixture of compassion and firmness. "You need to let them work. They're doing everything they can to save her. But you cannot be in there right now," she said, more gently this time. Raymond felt his legs weaken. He was so close, could see her in there, but couldn't do anything, couldn't help, couldn't even hold her hand and tell her he was there. He felt completely powerless, useless. The nurse noticed he was about to collapse and held him by the arms, supporting part of his weight. "Charging! Clear! 3rd shock!" came the tense voice of the doctor from inside again. Raymond closed his eyes tightly, tears streaming down his face. He prayed once more with every fiber of his being, asking any higher power that might be listening to save Evelyn, to make her heart beat again, not to take her from him. "Please, God. Please, not now. She doesn't deserve this. We don't deserve this, he thought, and then heard the sound of the third shock being applied. The longest silence of Raymond's life followed. He couldn't hear anything else coming from the room, just a low murmur of voices. The monitor alarm had stopped. Was that good? Was it bad? He didn't know, couldn't interpret. He opened his eyes and looked at the nurse, searching for some clue in her face, but she too was looking into the room, trying to see what was happening. Then finally, a voice came from inside. "We have a heartbeat. We have a pulse. She's back," someone shouted, and Raymond felt his knees give way completely. The nurse held him more firmly, preventing him from falling to the floor. Evelyn was alive. Her heart was beating again. She had survived. Raymond covered his face with his hands, sobbing loudly, a mixture of relief and emotional exhaustion taking over him. "She's alive, my God, she's alive," he said between sobs, and the nurse gently squeezed his shoulder. But the nurse knew that this was not cause for complete celebration. She'd seen cases like this many times before. Bringing someone back didn't mean they were out of danger. It only meant they had gained a little more time. She guided Raymond away from the door, taking him back down the hallway where he had come from. He didn't resist this time. He was too weak, emotionally destroyed. She led him back to the waiting room, making him sit in the same blue plastic chair where he had spent the last hour. Raymond let himself fall heavily, head in his hands, still trembling from head to toe. The nurse knelt in front of him, looking into his eyes. "You need to stay here and wait. A doctor will come talk to you as soon as possible. Do you understand?" she asked, her voice firm but gentle. Raymond nodded weakly, unable to speak. "She's back, but for how long?" he thought, feeling a new kind of fear settle in. The nurse stood up and returned to the emergency area, leaving Raymond alone again. He sat there, his entire body aching with tension, muscles rigid as stone. His hands trembled uncontrollably on his knees. He tried to join them, intertwine his fingers to stop the trembling, but it didn't work. It was as if his body had a life of its own, reacting to emotional trauma in a way he couldn't control. He looked around the waiting room and saw that some people were looking at him. Had they heard his cries? Had they noticed his desperation? He didn't care. Let them look. Let them judge. None of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was that Evelyn was alive. For now. But for how long? What comes next? He thought, wiping his tear-soaked face with the backs of his trembling hands. Another 15 minutes passed. To Raymond, they seemed like hours. He couldn't get the image out of his head of Evelyn lying on that stretcher, her body arching with the electric shocks, the monitor showing that horrible flat line. It had been so close, so frighteningly close to losing her. What if the third shock hadn't worked? What if her heart hadn't come back? He would now be receiving the news that she had died, that there had been nothing they could do. The thought was unbearable. He shook his head violently, trying to expel those images, trying to focus on the fact that she was alive. But then another thought came. If her heart had stopped once, it could stop again, at any moment. And maybe next time they wouldn't be able to bring her back. Don't think about that. Don't think about that now, he said to himself, but he couldn't help it. Finally, the double doors opened again and a doctor came out. He was a man in his 60s, tall and thin, with grey hair combed back and a well-trimmed white beard. He wore gold-rimmed glasses and had deep circles under his eyes, signs of many hours on duty. His lab coat was wrinkled and there were sweat marks at the armpits. He held a clipboard and looked around the waiting room until his eyes found Raymond. He walked directly to him, steps slow and tired. Raymond stood up immediately, his legs almost giving way again, but he forced himself to stand. He needed to hear what the doctor had to say, standing up, like a man, not collapsed in a chair. The doctor stopped in front of him and extended his hand. "Are you Mrs. Evelyn's husband?" he asked, his voice hoarse with fatigue. Raymond shook his hand, noticing that the doctor's palm was cold and damp. "I am. I'm Raymond. How is she? Please tell me she'll be all right," he said quickly. The doctor didn't answer immediately. He looked around, then gestured to a more private corner of the waiting room. Raymond followed him, his heart already sinking. Doctors never took family members to private corners to deliver good news. When they reached a more secluded space, near a window overlooking the dark parking lot outside. The doctor turned to face him. He put the clipboard under his arm and removed his glasses, cleaning them on the edge of his lab coat before putting them back on. Raymond noticed that the man's hands were also trembling slightly. He had just left that emergency room. It had been him who had applied the shocks to Evelyn. It had been him who had fought to bring her back, and now he was there, about to say something that clearly weighed on him. "Mr. Raymond, I need to be direct with you. We managed to revive her, but your wife's condition is critical," said the doctor, each word coming out slowly and clearly. Raymond felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath his feet. Critical. That word echoed in his mind like a death knell. He opened his mouth to ask what exactly that meant, but the doctor continued before he could speak. "When she arrived here, we did a series of emergency tests: MRI, CT scan, complete blood analysis. The results showed something very concerning," said the doctor, pausing to observe Raymond's reaction. He saw the man in front of him turn even paler, if that was possible. "Your wife has a rare degenerative disease, very rare. In more than 30 years of medicine, I've only seen 3 similar cases," continued the doctor, his voice carrying the weight of experience. Raymond felt his legs begin to tremble again. Degenerative disease. Rare. That didn't sound good at all. "What kind of disease? Is there a cure? Is there treatment?" he managed to ask, his voice coming out in a harsh whisper. The doctor sighed deeply, passing his hand over his face in a gesture of fatigue and frustration. "It's a condition that affects the central nervous system and vital organs simultaneously. It has probably been developing for months, maybe even years, but silently, without obvious symptoms. Until suddenly it reaches a critical point and the body begins to collapse," he explained, taking the clipboard from under his arm and leafing through some pages. Raymond saw numbers and graphs that he had no idea what they meant. "The problem is that the disease is already at a very advanced stage. The damage to the organs is severe," said the doctor, raising his eyes from the clipboard to face him. "But is there treatment, surgery, medication, anything?" Raymond asked desperately, stepping forward, almost invading the doctor's personal space. The doctor placed his hand on Raymond's shoulder, a gesture that tried to be comforting, but only increased his fear. Doctors only touched patients or family members like this when they had very bad news. "There is an experimental treatment. Very new, very expensive, and available at only one specialized center in another state," said the doctor, speaking slowly to ensure that Raymond was understanding every word. "It's a combination of gene therapy, immunosuppressive medications, and a complex surgical procedure. But I need to be honest with you. The chances aren't good," he continued, squeezing Raymond's shoulder slightly. "How many?" "What percentage chance does she have?" asked Raymond, holding his breath as he waited for the answer. The doctor looked directly into his eyes, without looking away, maintaining the dignity of being completely honest. 1%, maybe 2%. "Of the few cases that have tried this treatment, the survival rate was extremely low," he said, and saw Raymond stagger. Raymond had to lean against the wall next to him, the doctor's words falling on him like hammers. 1%. Evelyn had only 1% chance of survival, even with treatment, and without treatment. He didn't even want to think about it, but he needed to know. "And without the treatment, what happens if we do nothing?" he asked, although he already knew the answer deep in his heart. The doctor lowered his hand from his shoulder and looked at the floor for a moment before answering. When he looked back at Raymond, his eyes were moist behind his glasses. "So without treatment, she has 24 hours at most, maybe less. The organs will begin to fail one by one. First the kidneys, then the liver, then the lungs. And there will be nothing we can do to stop it," said the doctor, his voice breaking. "I am sorry, I really am," he said, and Raymond could see it was true. 24 hours, 1 day. Evelyn had only 1 day to live if he did nothing. Raymond felt the whole world collapse on him. How was this possible? How could someone be fine in the morning and have only 1 day to live by night? How could life be so cruel, so unfair, so random? He slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor, knees bent against his chest, head down. The tears came back full force, soaking his shirt already drenched with sweat. He sobbed loudly, not caring who might hear or see. All the pain, all the fear, all the despair he had been holding since Evelyn collapsed at the grocery store exploded at once. The doctor knelt beside him, his hand back on his shoulder. "Mr. Raymond, I know it's very difficult to process all this, but you need to make a decision. If we're going to try the treatment, it needs to be now. Every hour that passes decreases the chances even more," said the doctor gently. Raymond raised his head, his red and swollen eyes meeting the doctor's. Decision. He needed to make a decision. Try the experimental treatment that had only a 1% chance and was probably absurdly expensive, or let Evelyn go and have just one more day with her. But it wasn't really a choice, was it? Even if it was just 1%, it was better than zero. It was better than giving up. He couldn't simply accept that she would die without trying everything within his reach. Evelyn had done everything for him during all those years. She had worked alongside him at the grocery store, had sacrificed her own dreams to help him build the business, had stayed by his side even when money was tight and things were tough. He couldn't abandon her now. "How much does it cost?" "The treatment. How much does it cost?" he asked, wiping his face with his hands. The doctor hesitated. Raymond saw the hesitation, and his stomach sank even further. If the doctor was hesitating to state the price, it was because it was very high. The complete treatment, including the transfer to the specialized center, the procedures, medications, prolonged hospitalization, we're talking about something around $300,000. Maybe more depending on complications, said the doctor, carefully observing Raymond's reaction. $300,000. The number echoed in Raymond's mind like an impossible sentence. He didn't have that amount. He didn't even have $30,000. All he had was a failing grocery store full of debts that the bank was about to take. He ran his hands through his hair, pulling the strands hard, feeling the physical pain as a welcome distraction from the emotional pain. "I don't have that money. I don't have anywhere near that," he said, his voice coming out in a groan of despair. The doctor sighed, expecting that response. He had seen this scene unfold many times before, ordinary people, honest workers, confronted with medical costs that were completely beyond their reach. The public health system could cover many things, but experimental treatments at private specialized centers weren't one of them. "Do you have any assets, any property, something you could use as collateral for a loan?" He asked the doctor, although he knew he was asking for a lot. Raymond thought. He had the grocery store. The building where it operated was rented, but the inventory, equipment, commercial location, all of this technically had some value. But it was already mortgaged to the bank. He owed more than the business was worth. "I have a grocery store, but it's already mortgaged. I owe more than it's worth," he said, feeling helplessness take over. "But I'll do anything, anything." "There has to be a way," he said, grabbing the doctor's arm desperately. The doctor looked at that man clutching his arm, seeing the absolute desperation in his eyes, and felt his heart tighten. He had a daughter about Evelyn's age. If it were her lying on that stretcher, he would do anything too, anything. "Look, I'm going to be honest with you. The hospital can accept a payment plan. It can accept assets as collateral even if they're mortgaged, as long as you assume the risk of losing everything if you can't pay. But you need to understand what you're doing. You're risking everything for a 1% chance. And if it doesn't work out, you'll be left with nothing, without your wife and without your business." "Nothing," said the doctor, being brutally honest because he thought Raymond deserved to know exactly what he was getting into. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, looking deeply into Raymond's eyes. Raymond didn't need to think. The answer came instantly from the depths of his soul. "Yes, I am sure. Without her, I already have nothing anyway. The grocery store means nothing without her. Money means nothing. None of it matters if she's not here," he said, his voice firm for the first time since they had arrived at the hospital. "I'll sign whatever is needed. I'll give whatever is needed. But we try. We try to save her," he said, getting up from the floor with difficulty, but with renewed determination. The doctor also stood up, studying Raymond's face, looking for any sign of doubt. He found none. Only absolute determination and love. He nodded slowly. "All right, I'll talk to the hospital administration and the specialized center. We'll prepare the papers, but it needs to be quick. Very quick," said the doctor, and Raymond nodded vigorously. The next hours passed in a frantic whirlwind. Raymond was taken to a hospital administrative office where a middle-aged woman with glasses and short hair was waiting for him with a stack of papers. She explained each document, each clause, each risk. Raymond barely listened. He just signed where she indicated, one signature after another, surrendering everything he had built in 25 years of work, the mortgage on the grocery store, the inventory, the equipment, the few valuable pieces of furniture they had at home, even the old car he used for deliveries. Everything. When he finished signing the last paper, he looked at the stack of documents on the table and felt a strange emptiness. He had just signed away his entire life. But if it saved Evelyn, it was worth every penny, every sacrifice. Done. It's all here. Now save my wife, he said to the woman, who just nodded sympathetically. Then came the waiting again. Raymond was informed that Evelyn was being prepared for transfer. A specialized ambulance was on its way from the treatment center, equipped with all the necessary apparatus to keep her stable during the 3-hour journey. He could go along. He returned to the waiting room, but this time he couldn't sit down. He paced back and forth, hands in his pockets, then crossed over his chest, then running through his hair. His phone had rung several times. They were messages from neighbors and acquaintances who had seen the ambulance at the grocery store and wanted to know what had happened. He ignored them all. He didn't have the energy to explain, to receive condolences or empty words of support. All he wanted was to see Evelyn leave for that treatment that could save her, or kill her trying. 1%, just one, but it's better than 0. It has to work. It has to work, he thought repeatedly, like a mantra. Finally, after 2 more hours of waiting, he saw movement at the double doors. A stretcher was being pushed by 2 paramedics, and lying on it, covered by white sheets up to her neck, with tubes coming out of her arms and an oxygen mask covering her face, was Evelyn. Raymond ran to them, his heart racing. She was unconscious, as pale as paper, but she was alive. He could see her chest rising and falling slightly under the sheets. He reached out and touched her face, caressing her cold cheek with trembling fingers. "I'm here, love. I'm here. You're going to be okay, I promise you'll be okay," he whispered, although he knew she couldn't hear him. One of the paramedics looked at him. "You're the husband?" "You can come with us in the ambulance," said the man, and Raymond nodded, following them toward the exit. The journey to the specialized center was long and silent. Raymond sat on a small bench inside the ambulance, watching the paramedics monitor Evelyn constantly. They checked the devices, adjusted tubes, wrote down numbers on clipboards. Sometimes they exchanged worried glances between themselves, but said nothing. Raymond didn't ask. He didn't want to hear if something was wrong. He just wanted to reach their destination, hand Evelyn over to the specialists who could save her, and pray that the treatment would work. He held her hand throughout the whole journey, squeezing it gently, trying to transmit his strength, his love, his desire for her to fight. "Hang in there, Evelyn. Just a little longer." "We're almost there," he whispered from time to time, more to himself than to her. The city lights were left behind, replaced by the darkness of the road, only the ambulance lights cutting through the night. When they finally arrived at the specialized center, it was already early morning. Raymond was exhausted, physically and emotionally drained, but he couldn't rest. Evelyn was rushed inside the modern and imposing building. Raymond tried to follow, but was stopped by a receptionist who asked him to wait while the doctors evaluated the patient. He was taken to another waiting room, this one more comfortable than the previous hospital, with padded chairs and a coffee machine. But physical comfort did not diminish the mental agony. He sat down and waited. Once again, always waiting. Always unable to do anything but wait and pray. He looked at the clock on the wall. It was almost 4 in the morning. Evelyn had fainted less than 12 hours ago, but it seemed like an eternity. How can life change so quickly? How? He thought, letting his head fall back against the wall. 2 hours passed. Raymond had dozed off briefly, exhaustion finally winning, but woke up startled each time he heard footsteps in the corridor. Finally, at 6 in the morning, when the first rays of sunlight began to illuminate the sky through the windows, a door opened. A doctor came out. He was a younger man than the previous one, must have been about 40, with dark hair and a serious expression. He wore a green surgical cap and still had a mask hanging around his neck. His surgical gloves had been removed, but Raymond could see the red marks they had left on his wrists. He had just come out of a procedure. Had it been with Evelyn? The doctor looked around the empty waiting room, and his eyes fell on Raymond, who was already standing. "Mr. Raymond?" he asked, and Raymond nodded, unable to speak. "We need to talk," said the doctor, and the tone of his voice made Raymond's stomach sink. Raymond walked toward the doctor with trembling steps, each movement seeming to require a monumental effort. His eyes were fixed on the face of the man in front of him, desperately searching for some clue, some sign of what was to come. The doctor had that controlled expression that healthcare professionals learn to use, but Raymond could see the tension around his eyes, the way his lips were slightly pressed. He knew that look. He had seen it on the face of the previous doctor at the hospital. It was the look of someone who was about to give difficult news. The corridor around them was silent, only the low hum of the air conditioner filling the space. Raymond stopped a few steps from the doctor, hands closed into fists at his sides, mentally preparing himself for what would come. "How is my wife? Did the treatment work? Will she be all right?" he asked, the words coming out too fast, stumbling over each other. The doctor gestured to a small room next door, a kind of private office with 2 chairs and a table. "Let's talk in here, Mr. Raymond." "It will be more comfortable," he said, his voice soft but firm. Raymond felt his stomach churn. Doctors never took family members to private rooms to give good news. He hesitated for a moment, wanting to refuse, wanting to stay right there in the corridor, where at least there was space to breathe. But his feet moved on their own, following the doctor into the small room. The door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded too final. The doctor pointed to one of the upholstered chairs. "Please sit down," he said. Raymond shook his head. "I prefer to stand. Just tell me, how is she?" he said, crossing his arms over his chest as if he could protect himself from what was to come. The doctor sighed and leaned against the desk, crossing his own arms, unconsciously mirroring Raymond's defensive posture. He removed the surgical cap from his head, revealing dark hair stuck to his forehead with sweat. There was deep fatigue in his eyes, and Raymond realized that he had probably spent the last few hours working on Evelyn. "We performed the initial procedure as planned. The gene therapy was administered, the immunosuppressive medications are being continuously infused, and the surgery to correct some of the most critical organ damage was performed," he said, speaking slowly and clearly. Raymond felt a flash of hope. Surgery performed, medications administered. This sounded like progress. But then the doctor continued, and hope began to wither. "However, her body is not responding the way we expected," he said, and Raymond felt his legs weaken. Raymond stepped forward, his hands nervously opening and closing. "What do you mean, not responding? Is she getting worse? Is she going to die?" he asked, his voice rising in pitch, bordering on panic. The doctor raised his hands in a calming gesture. "She is stable at the moment, but stable doesn't mean improving. We had to induce a coma to give her body the best chance to recover without wasting energy fighting against pain or the stress of the procedure," he explained, choosing each word carefully. "The induced coma is a protective measure. It allows all the body's resources to focus on healing, but I can't guarantee that she will wake up. I can't guarantee that when we remove the medications keeping her sedated, she will come back to us," he said, and his voice carried the weight of many bad experiences. "She is fighting, Mr. Raymond. But the fight is only beginning," he said, and Raymond had to hold onto the table to keep from falling. The air seemed to have been sucked from the room. Raymond looked at the doctor, trying to process the words he had just heard. Induced coma. Can't guarantee. May not wake up. Each phrase was like a knife being plunged into his heart. He had sold everything. He had given every penny he owned, had signed papers that left him with nothing. And for what? To put her in a coma from which she might never wake up. Tears began to burn his eyes again, but he blinked them back hard, refusing to cry in front of the doctor. He needed to be strong. Evelyn needed him to be strong. For how long? How long will she be in this coma? He managed to ask, his voice coming out hoarse. The doctor let out another long sigh. At least a week, maybe 2, maybe more. It depends on how her body responds to the treatment. We'll monitor her constantly and make adjustments as necessary, but I need to be honest with you, he said, pausing. Raymond looked directly into the doctor's eyes, bracing himself for more bad news. It seemed that was all he received lately. Bad news after bad news, each worse than the last. Be honest, I need to know the truth. I deserve to know, he said, straightening his shoulders, trying to appear stronger than he felt. The doctor nodded, respecting the courage of the man before him. The treatment we're doing is only the first phase. If she survives this phase, and that's a big if, she will need more sessions, more medications, more procedures. We are talking about weeks, possibly months of intensive treatment, he said, watching the color drain from Raymond's face. And even then, the chances of her recovering completely are very, very small. The disease has caused extensive damage. Some may be irreversible, he said, and saw Raymond cringe as if he had been struck. More treatment, more medications, more procedures, and Raymond had just spent everything he had on the first phase. He had nothing left to give. Literally nothing. The grocery store was mortgaged. The car had been sold. The few valuable pieces of furniture were listed as collateral. He had nothing left. How could he pay for more treatment? How could he continue saving Evelyn when he had no more resources? The reality of the situation began to fall on him like an avalanche, crushing and suffocating. He had done everything right. He had made the decision to fight, not to give up. He had sacrificed everything. And yet, it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. I don't have any more money. I gave everything I had to pay for this first phase. I have nothing left, he said, his voice breaking on the last word. He covered his face with his hands, finally letting the tears fall. The doctor approached and placed a hand on Raymond's shoulder, a gesture of genuine compassion. He had seen many families destroyed not just by disease, but by the impossible financial cost of treatments that should be basic rights. It was one of the cruelest parts of his profession. I understand, Mr. Raymond, and I'm sorry. Very sorry. We will do everything in our power to help her with what's already been paid for. And we'll see what we can do in terms of financial assistance, support programs, anything that might ease the burden, he said, knowing they were empty words, promises that probably couldn't be kept. But it was all he could offer. For now you can see her. She's in the intensive care unit, room 3, but I need to warn you, he said, hesitating. Warn me about what? Asked Raymond, wiping his face with the backs of his hands. The doctor released Raymond's shoulder and stepped back, creating a little space between them. She's connected to many machines. Tubes, monitors, life support machines. It can be shocking to see. Many people aren't prepared for the visual reality of an ICU, he explained, his voice carrying the experience of having seen many family members break down at seeing their loved ones in that state. But she's still your Evelyn. Under all those tubes and wires, it's still her. And there are studies showing that patients in comas can hear familiar voices. So talk to her. Hold her hand. Let her know you're there, he said, trying to provide some comfort, some hope. She knows I'm here. She's always known, said Raymond, his voice firm despite the tears. He straightened his shoulders again, wiped away the remaining tears, and looked at the doctor. Can you take me to her now? He asked. The doctor nodded and opened the door of the room, gesturing for Raymond to follow him. They walked down the silent corridor, passing other closed doors, nurses carrying clipboards and medications, carts filled with medical equipment. Raymond tried not to think about what he would see when he reached Evelyn's room. He tried to prepare himself mentally, but how does one prepare to see the person they love connected to machines that keep them alive? They turned a corner and entered a different ward, quieter with softer lights. A sign on the wall read, Intensive Care Unit, Restricted Access. The doctor swiped a card in a reader, and the glass doors automatically opened. They entered a short corridor with several glass rooms on each side. Raymond could see patients in some of the beds, all connected to numerous devices. It's here, room 3, said the doctor, stopping in front of one of the glass doors. Raymond looked through the glass and his heart broke. There was Evelyn lying in a white hospital bed, so small and fragile under the sheets. Her face was pale, almost the same color as the pillows supporting her head. There was a tube going down her throat, connected to a ventilator that breathed for her with a rhythmic and mechanical sound. Wires came out from sensors attached to her chest, connecting to monitors that showed numbers and graphs that Raymond didn't understand. There were bags of transparent liquids hanging on stands beside the bed, tubes going down from them to the veins in Evelyn's arms. Her hands were resting on her abdomen, fingers slightly curved, completely motionless. Raymond placed his hand on the glass as if he could touch her through it. "Can I go in?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. The doctor nodded. "Of course, but wash your hands first and put on a mask. Her immune system is very compromised. We need to minimize any risk of infection," he said, pointing to a sink and a mask dispenser on the wall. Raymond followed the instructions mechanically, washing his hands with antibacterial soap, drying them with paper towels, putting the disposable mask over his nose and mouth. Each movement seemed to happen in slow motion. Finally, he opened the door of the room and entered. The sound of the ventilator was louder in here, a rhythmic sound of air being pushed in and pulled out of Evelyn's lungs. The monitors beeped softly with each heartbeat. The smell of disinfectant was strong, mixed with something medicinal that he couldn't identify. He approached the bed slowly, afraid that if he moved too quickly, something might break. Some tube might come loose. When he finally reached the side of the bed, he looked at Evelyn's face up close and felt the tears return with full force. "Hi, my love. It's me. I'm here," he said, his voice choked even through the mask. Raymond extended his trembling hand and touched Evelyn's hand with delicacy, as if she were made of glass and could break at the slightest touch. Her skin was cold, much colder than it should be. He wrapped her hand with his, trying to warm it, trying to pass a bit of his own life to her. His fingers traced the blue veins visible under the pale skin, passed over the bandages that covered where the intravenous tubes were inserted. He leaned closer, looking at her face, searching for some sign of recognition, some indication that she knew he was there. But there was nothing. Her eyes were closed, dark eyelashes against pale skin, without even a tremor of movement under the eyelids. Her mouth was distorted by the tube that went down her throat. There was no expression, no emotion, just emptiness. "You need to fight, Evelyn. I know it's hard, but you need to fight. I can't do this without you," he said, squeezing her hand gently. Behind him, Raymond heard the door close softly. He turned his head and saw that the doctor had left, giving him privacy. I was alone with Evelyn now. He pulled a chair that was leaning against the wall and positioned it next to the bed, sitting down without letting go of her hand. He stayed there for hours, just sitting, holding her hand, watching the mechanical movement of her chest rising and falling with each forced breath from the ventilator. Sometimes he talked to her, telling her about the ambulance trip, about the beautiful building of the specialized center, about how everyone was doing their best to help her. Sometimes he just remained silent, listening to the sounds of the machines, the constant beep of the heart monitor, ensuring that she was still alive. Time lost meaning in there. It could have been minutes or hours. Raymond didn't know anymore. "I sold the grocery store, sold everything, but I don't care. None of this matters if you're not here with me," he whispered, kissing the back of her cold hand. A nurse came in at some point, a young woman with blonde hair tied in a high ponytail. She checked the monitors, adjusted some of the medication bags, wrote numbers on a clipboard. She smiled gently at Raymond through her mask. "You must be exhausted. Don't you want to go rest a bit? There's a family room at the end of the hall. There are sofas, a coffee machine. I promise if there's any change, anything at all, I'll come get you immediately," she said, her voice soft and comforting. Raymond shook his head, squeezing Evelyn's hand tighter. "No, I'm staying here." "I need to be with her," he said, his voice leaving no room for arguments. The nurse nodded with understanding. "I understand, but at least try to eat something, all right? I'll ask someone to bring you a sandwich and water," she said, and before he could refuse, she left the room. The days began to blur. Raymond didn't leave Evelyn's side. He slept in the uncomfortable chair beside the bed, waking every few hours with pain in his back and neck. He ate the sandwiches that the nurses brought, though he couldn't taste anything. He drank water mechanically because someone insisted he needed to. But his attention never left Evelyn. He watched every number on the monitors, memorized the patterns, panicked whenever something changed even slightly. The nurses tried to explain what each number meant, but it was too much information to process. All he really needed to know was if she was getting better, and nobody could tell him that. "It's still too early," they said. "We need to give the treatment time," they repeated. But Raymond saw the doubt in their eyes, saw the growing concern each time they checked the test results. "She's not getting better, is she?" he asked one of the nurses on the third day, and her silence was answer enough. On the fourth day, the doctor who had performed the initial procedure returned. He entered the room accompanied by two other doctors Raymond didn't know, an older man and a middle-aged woman. They gathered around Evelyn's bed, looking at the monitors, flipping through papers on clipboards, talking in low voices using technical terms that Raymond didn't understand. He stood up from the chair, still holding Evelyn's hand, and looked at them anxiously. "What's happening? Is she worse? Tell me what's going on," he said, his voice rising. The younger doctor turned to him, his expression grave. "Her vital signs are stable, which is good, but the blood tests show that her body is not responding to the treatment as well as we had hoped. The inflammation markers are still very high. Kidney function is compromised," he said, choosing his words carefully. Raymond felt the world spin around him. Not responding. Kidney function compromised. He knew enough about basic medicine to understand that this wasn't good. "What are you going to do? Is there something you can do?" he asked, looking desperately from one doctor to another. The female doctor stepped forward. She had short grey hair and gentle eyes behind thin-framed glasses. "We'll adjust the medication protocol, increase some doses, add new immunosuppressants. Maybe do another session of gene therapy if her body proves strong enough to handle it," she said. But there was hesitation in her voice. "But I won't lie to you. Each additional procedure puts more stress on a body that is already extremely fragile. There's a risk that the treatment could cause more damage than the disease itself," she said, and Raymond felt his legs weaken again. The older doctor, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke. His voice was deep and carried the weight of decades of experience. "Mr. Raymond, I think it's time we start having difficult conversations. Conversations about what to do if her condition continues to deteriorate, about what extreme measures you would be willing to take, and which ones you wouldn't," he said, looking directly into Raymond's eyes. "We need to know if, in the worst-case scenario, you would like us to continue with full resuscitation measures, or if you would prefer we let her go peacefully," he said, and Raymond felt as if he had been struck by lightning. Let her go peacefully. They were talking about giving up, about letting her die. "No, don't give up on her. She'll get better. She'll wake up," he shouted, squeezing Evelyn's hand so hard his fingers turned white. The three doctors exchanged glances among themselves, that silent communication that professionals develop. The younger doctor stepped forward and placed his hand on Raymond's arm. "No one is giving up, Mr. Raymond. We're just being realistic about the possibilities, and we want to make sure we're respecting her wishes and yours, but as long as there's a chance, we'll keep fighting. That I promise you," he said firmly. The other two doctors nodded in agreement. "We'll make adjustments to the medications today. We'll monitor her closely over the next 48 hours. If there's any improvement, we'll continue with the plan. If not," he hesitated, "then we'll have to reassess our options," he said, and Raymond just nodded, unable to speak through the knot that had formed in his throat. The doctors left the room, leaving him alone with Evelyn once more. Raymond collapsed back in the chair, still holding Evelyn's hand, and finally let it all out. He cried like he hadn't cried since he was a child, deep, painful sobs that shook his entire body. He cried for the injustice of it all, for the cruelty of life, for the real possibility that Evelyn might never wake up again. He cried for all the years they should have had ahead, for all the plans they had made and would never fulfill. He cried for the grocery store they had built together, and that was now in the hands of the bank. He cried for everything he had lost and everything he could still lose. When he finally had no more tears to cry, he leaned over and rested his head on the bed next to Evelyn's body, still holding her hand. "I don't know what to do, love. I gave everything, did everything I could, and it wasn't enough." "It's never enough," he whispered, his voice hoarse and broken. "Please give me a sign, anything, squeeze my hand, move a finger. Just show me you're still fighting," he pleaded, but there was no response. Evelyn remained motionless, only the ventilator continuing its mechanical work, the monitor continuing its constant beep. Raymond stayed there, his head resting on the bed, his eyes closed, too exhausted to cry anymore, too tired to think. He must have dozed off because he was awakened by a vibration in his pocket. It took a moment to process what it was. His cell phone. He had put it on silent days ago, tired of calls and messages from acquaintances offering empty condolences. But someone was calling now. He pulled the phone from his pocket and looked at the screen. It was a number he recognized, the bank. His heart sank even further, if that was possible. He considered not answering, ignoring the call, but he knew they would keep trying. With a heavy sigh, he slid his finger across the screen and brought the device to his ear. "Hello?" he said, his voice coming out tired and defeated. The voice on the other end was male, professional, emotionless. "Mr. Raymond Henderson, this is from the Asset Recovery Department. We are calling to inform you that the eviction process for the commercial property located on Flores Street has been finalized. The grocery store has been officially sealed and is scheduled for auction next week," the man said, clearly reading from a script. Raymond closed his eyes, feeling each word like a punch. The grocery store was sealed. His 25-year business, his livelihood, his legacy, was now in the hands of the bank, waiting to be sold to the highest bidder. "You have until noon tomorrow to remove any personal belongings not listed as collateral in the mortgage contract. After that time, everything will be considered bank property and included in the auction," the man continued. "Do you understand the information I've just given you?" he asked, and Raymond had to hold himself back from hanging up on him. Raymond pressed the cell phone hard against his ear, anger bubbling inside him along with sadness and despair. That man was talking about the grocery store as if it were just another item on a list of tasks to be completed. As if it didn't represent a lifetime of work, of sweat, of sacrifice. As if it weren't the place where he and Evelyn had spent every day of the last 25 years, building something together. "I understand," he managed to say, his voice coming out rough. He didn't trust himself to say anything more without exploding. The man on the other end continued. "Excellent. A bank representative will be present at the location tomorrow from 8 in the morning until noon to supervise the removal of your belongings. Please bring identification and a copy of the mortgage contract if possible. Have a good day, Mr. Henderson," he said, and before Raymond could respond, the call was ended. Raymond looked at the phone in his hand, the screen now dark, and felt like throwing it against the wall. Tomorrow. He had until tomorrow at noon to return to the grocery store and rescue what remained of his old life. The grocery store where it all began, where Evelyn had fallen, where his world had crumbled. The last thing he wanted was to go back there, to face that place full of memories, now empty and sealed by the bank. But he had no choice. There were some personal belongings there, framed photos that were kept in the small office at the back. Some clothes that Evelyn kept in a cabinet to change into after work. The old wall clock that had belonged to Raymond's father. Small things with no monetary value, but priceless to him. He couldn't let the bank take that too. But how could he leave here? How could he leave Evelyn, even for a few hours? "I can't leave you alone, not now," he whispered, looking at her pale, motionless face. But reality was inescapable. He needed to go. He needed to resolve this last practical matter before he lost even the physical memories he had. Raymond looked at the clock on the bedroom wall. It was almost 8 in the evening. He had the whole night and part of the morning to make a decision. But he already knew what he would do. He would go early in the morning, quickly retrieve his belongings and return as fast as possible. A few hours. He could leave her for a few hours. The nurses were there. The doctors were monitoring. If anything changed, they would call immediately. He leaned in and kissed Evelyn's cold forehead through the mask he was wearing. "I need to go out for a few hours tomorrow morning, but I'll come back. I promise I'll come back. And when I return, you'll be here waiting for me. You'll be better. You'll be fighting. Because that's what you do. You fight," he said, as if he could convince her by the strength of his words alone. The night passed slowly. Raymond didn't really sleep, just dozed off in short intervals, always waking up startled, checking the monitors, checking if Evelyn was still there, still breathing, still alive. Every hour a different nurse came in to check vital signs, change medication bags, record information. Some talked to him, trying to offer comfort with kind words. Others worked in silence, respecting his space. All had that same expression of compassion mixed with concern. None of them told him that Evelyn was improving when the first rays of sunlight began to illuminate the sky through the small window of the room. Raymond knew it was time. He got up from the chair, his body sore and stiff from spending another night in an uncomfortable position. He stretched his arms above his head, hearing his bones crack. He looked at Evelyn, still as motionless as the night before. "I'm going now, my love, but I'll be back soon. Wait for me, okay?" he said, kissing her forehead once more before reluctantly leaving the room. Raymond found a nurse at the ICU Central Station and informed her that he needed to leave for a few hours, but would return before lunch. She noted his cell phone number and promised to call immediately if there was any change, for better or worse. He thanked her, picked up his wallet and car keys that he had forgotten he no longer had. He would have to take a taxi or bus. He left the specialized center for the cold morning, the fresh air hitting his face like a slap. He had spent so many days locked in that room that he had forgotten what the outside world was like. The streets were beginning to get busy with people going to work, cars honking, the normal noise of a city waking up. Everything seemed surreally normal, as if the world didn't know or care that Raymond's life was falling apart. How can everything continue normally when nothing is normal, he thought, walking to the nearest bus stop. The trip back to his town was long and painful. The bus was packed with morning workers, all with their tired faces looking at cell phones or at nothing. Raymond squeezed into a seat near the back and looked out the window, watching the landscape change from modern buildings to older constructions as they moved away from the center. He hadn't been home since the night Evelyn had fainted. Hadn't seen his street, his neighbors, his neighborhood. Everything seemed distant now, as if it belonged to another life, to another person. When the bus finally stopped at the point near his grocery store, he got off with trembling legs. He walked the 3 blocks to Flores Street, each step heavy as lead. And then he turned the corner and saw it. The grocery store. His heart tightened painfully in his chest. The facade was exactly as he remembered, but different. The doors were sealed with chains and padlocks. A large bank notice was pasted on the window. "Property under judicial recovery. Auction coming soon," it said in large red letters. Raymond stopped on the sidewalk in front, just looking. 25 years of his life were locked behind those chains. 25 years of hard work, of customers served, of products sold, of bills paid with difficulty but always paid. 25 years of Evelyn by his side, smiling even on difficult days, maintaining hope even when he wanted to give up. And now, it was all over. Sealed. Finished. A man in a suit was standing next to the door, holding a clipboard. He looked at Raymond and nodded. "Mr. Raymond Henderson?" he asked, looking at the clipboard. Raymond nodded, unable to speak. The man began to unlock the padlocks. "You have until noon. I'll stay here supervising. You can take only the items that are not listed in the guarantee contract. If you have doubts about any item, ask me before removing it," he said mechanically, clearly having done this many times before. He opened the doors and stepped aside, letting Raymond enter his former establishment. Raymond took the first step inside and was hit by a wave of memories so strong that he had to lean on the doorframe. The familiar smell, even after days of being closed, the smell of cleaning products, fruits, bread, the smell of home, but now mixed with mold and dust. The shelves were exactly as he had left them, still with some products scattered about. The counter where he had spent countless hours serving customers, doing accounts, worrying about debts. And there, in the aisle next to it, the place where Evelyn had fallen. He looked at that specific spot on the floor and saw it all again. Saw her staggering, bringing her hand to her head, falling between the shelves. Heard the horrible sound of her body hitting the floor. Felt the absolute panic of running to her and finding her unconscious. Tears began to roll down his face again. "Everything started here, and now everything ends here too," he said to the empty space, his voice echoing in the silent grocery store. Raymond stood there for long minutes, just looking around the empty grocery store, letting the memories wash over him like violent waves. Every corner of that place told a story. The shelf where Evelyn always organized products with such care, aligning each can perfectly. The small space behind the counter where she used to stand when business was slow, reading old magazines and smiling at him. The window through which sunlight entered every morning, illuminating her face when she opened the curtains. Everything was exactly as he remembered, but at the same time completely different. Life had been sucked out of that place. It was no longer a business, no longer a home. It was just an empty space waiting to be sold to strangers. He wiped the tears from his face with the back of his hand and forced his legs to move. He needed to get the personal belongings and leave. Return to Evelyn. "Let's get this over with. The faster I finish, the faster I can get back to her," he thought, taking a deep breath. He walked to the small office at the back of the grocery store, his steps echoing in the heavy silence. The office door was ajar, exactly as he had left it. He pushed it completely open and entered the tiny space that had served as his refuge during all those years. There was an old wooden desk covered with papers, mostly unpaid bills that he would never be able to settle now. A worn-out swivel chair where he had spent countless nights doing the accounts, trying to make the money last. And on the wall the photos, several framed photos of important moments. Him and Evelyn on the day they opened the grocery store, both young and full of hope, smiling at the camera in front of the newly painted facade. A photo of the 10th anniversary of the business with a small cake that Evelyn had made. Another one of a Christmas where they had decorated the grocery store with blinking lights and an inflatable Santa Claus. "We were so happy, so naively happy," he said aloud, carefully removing the photos from the wall. Raymond placed the framed photos inside a cardboard box he found in the corner of the office. Then he took the wall clock that had belonged to his father, an old dark wood clock that still worked perfectly after decades. He wrapped it in some old papers and placed it in the box too. He opened the desk drawers looking for other personal items. He found pens, paper clips, some old receipts, nothing of value. But in the last drawer, at the bottom, he found something that made his heart tighten. It was a letter. A letter that Evelyn had written to him years ago, on one of their anniversaries. He vaguely remembered her giving it to him, but he had stored it away and forgotten. Now, holding the yellowed envelope in his hands, he hesitated. Should he read it? Should he open wounds that were already bleeding? But he couldn't resist. He opened the envelope with trembling fingers and took out the folded paper. Evelyn's handwriting, delicate and familiar, covered the page. "My love, you always worry so much. You always carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. But I want you to know that no matter what happens, we have each other. And that's all that matters. I love you today, tomorrow and forever," the letter said. And Raymond had to sit down in the chair because his legs couldn't hold him anymore. He held the letter against his chest, closing his eyes tightly, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to overflow again. How could she have written that? How could she have known that he would need to read these words now, years later? It was as if she knew that one day he would be here, alone, destroyed, needing to be reminded that their love was stronger than anything. But was it? She was in a coma, perhaps dying, and he was here collecting the remains of a life that was over. Was love really enough against the cruelty of fate? He carefully folded the letter and placed it in his shirt pocket, right over his heart. He wasn't going to let the bank have that. That was his. It was theirs. "I'll come back to you. And you'll wake up. You have to wake up. We have to have our forever," he whispered into the emptiness, as if Evelyn could hear him across the distance. Raymond was about to stand up and continue collecting his belongings when he heard a sound. A light creak, the front door of the grocery store. He frowned, confused. The bank representative was outside, but he wouldn't come in without notice. Maybe it was just the wind? But then he heard footsteps. Light, hesitant footsteps. Someone had entered the grocery store. Raymond quickly got up from the chair, his heart racing. Who could it be? He left the box on the floor and walked back to the main area of the store, his muscles tense. When he turned the corner and entered the main hall, he stopped abruptly. There, standing near the entrance, was a woman, a thin woman in her 30s, with disheveled brown hair tied in a loose ponytail. She wore old and worn clothes, a faded blouse and jeans with patches on the knees. And beside her, holding her hands, were two small children, a boy of perhaps 5 years old and a girl who couldn't be more than 3. All three looked frightened, eyes downcast, as if expecting to be kicked out at any moment. The woman slowly raised her eyes when she realized Raymond had entered, and he saw deep shame in her face. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, clearly struggling to find the right words. The children beside her were too quiet, the way children are when they're used to having to be invisible. Raymond vaguely recognized her. He had seen her in the neighborhood a few times, always with those two children, always looking tired and overwhelmed. Mary, that was her name. He had heard neighbors mention it. A widow who lived a few streets away, struggling to raise her children alone after her husband had died in a workplace accident years ago. She had come to the grocery store a few times in the past, apologizing as she bought the cheapest items, always carefully counting the coins before paying. He had been kind to her on those occasions, sometimes even giving a discreet discount when he saw that she didn't have enough money. But now, seeing her standing there in his ruined grocery store, he felt only irritation. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice coming out harsher than he intended. Mary took a step back, startled by the tone, and the children hid behind her legs. She swallowed hard, eyes still downcast, hands visibly trembling. When he finally spoke, his voice was so low that Raymond could barely hear. "Mr. Raymond, I heard what happened to your wife. The whole neighborhood is talking about it. I'm so sorry. Very sorry." "I can't imagine what you're going through," she said, and there were tears in her eyes. Raymond felt a tightness in his chest, but he didn't respond. He just stood there, waiting for her to continue. Mary wiped away a tear that ran down her face and took a deep breath, gathering courage. "I didn't want to bother you, especially now. I know this isn't the right time, but I have nowhere else to turn," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "My children haven't eaten for 2 days. I have nothing left at home, nothing, and I saw that there's food there in the trash, food that's about to expire, and I thought that maybe you could." She couldn't finish the sentence, the shame being too much. Raymond looked at her, then at the children hiding behind her legs, and something inside him broke. It wasn't compassion, it wasn't empathy, it was anger. Pure irrational anger that had been building up during days of fear, pain and despair. Anger against life, against God, against fate, against everything. And now there was a target for all that anger. Someone weaker, someone vulnerable, someone who couldn't fight back. He stepped forward, fists clenched at his sides, eyes burning. "You've always helped me before. You've always been so kind. I'm so sorry to ask again, especially now, but I have no choice. Please, Mr. Raymond, just the food that's going to the trash anyway, just that." "Please," said Mary, finally raising her eyes to face him, and there was absolute desperation in her face, but Raymond didn't see the desperation. He only saw another person wanting to take something from him when he had nothing left to give. "You want what? You want me to give you food? Expired food from the trash?" he asked, his voice rising in volume. Mary nodded quickly, tears falling freely now. "Yes, sir. Anything. I don't care if it's expired. I just need to save my children." "I have no other choice, please," she said, clasping her hands in supplication. The little girl behind her began to whimper softly, the sound breaking the tense silence of the grocery store. And it was that sound, that childish cry of hunger and fear, that made something explode inside Raymond. All the pain he had been holding in, all the agony of seeing Evelyn in that hospital bed, all the humiliation of losing everything he had built, it all came to the surface at once. He took another step forward, his face contorted in anger. "Do you want food? You want food?" he shouted, his voice echoing off the empty walls. Mary stepped back, her eyes wide with fear. "I lost everything, everything. My wife is dying in a hospital. I sold my grocery store, my car, everything I had to try to save her. And you come here at the worst moment of my life asking me for expired food?" he shouted, each word coming out like poison. Mary was trembling now, her protective hands on the shoulders of the crying children behind her. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Raymond. I didn't know it was so bad. I just thought—" She tried to speak, but Raymond cut her off. "You thought what? That I had an obligation to give you something? That because I helped you before, I have to keep helping you forever?" He advanced another step, and Mary took another step back, bumping into the door. "I have nothing. No more grocery store, no more money, no more anything, and you come here trying to make me feel sorry." He pointed his finger at her, his hand shaking with anger. "You know what's worse? It's that you're here crying because your children haven't eaten for 2 days. 2 days. My wife might never wake up ever again. Do you understand that? Ever again, he shouted, and his voice was hoarse from so much shouting. Get out of here now, he shouted, pointing to the door. Mary was openly crying now, sobs shaking her thin body. The children behind her were crying too, frightened by the shouting, by the anger of the big man in front of them. I'm sorry, Mr. Raymond, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to bother you, I'll go. I'm sorry, she said between sobs, turning toward the door. But Raymond wasn't finished. All his anger, all his pain was coming out now, like an overflowing river, and he couldn't stop it. Get out of here. Go away. I never want to see your face again. Don't come back here asking for anything. I'm not a food bank, I'm not charity. Take care of your own life and leave me in peace, he shouted, taking another step forward. Mary turned completely and practically ran to the door, pulling the 2 children with her. The little boy stumbled and almost fell, but she quickly caught him, exiting through the door with all 3 of them crying. And don't come back here. Never again, shouted Raymond one last time, his voice following them out. Through the dirty grocery store window, Raymond saw Mary running on the sidewalk, the 2 small children struggling to keep up with her, all 3 of them crying. Some neighbors passing by on the street stopped to look, turning their heads between Mary running and the grocery store from which she had just left. Their expressions changed from curiosity to shock when they realized what had happened. Raymond saw an elderly lady who lived on the next street put her hand over her mouth, horrified. He saw a man who always bought bread at the store shake his head in disapproval. He saw a young mother with a baby stroller turn her back, as if she no longer wanted to look at him. They had seen, they had heard, they knew what he had done. They knew he had yelled at a widow and 2 hungry children, had thrown them out as if they were garbage. So what? So what if they saw? Damn all of them. Damn the whole world, he thought. But even as he thought this, he knew he was wrong. Raymond moved away from the window and walked to the door, locking it firmly. The sound of the latch closing echoed through the empty store like a gunshot. He rested his forehead against the cold glass door, closing his eyes, breathing heavily. His heart was still racing, the adrenaline of anger still running through his veins. But slowly, very slowly, the anger began to dissipate. And in the vacuum it left behind came something worse. Shame. Deep and devastating shame. What had he done? He had yelled at a woman who was just trying to feed her children, had thrown her out with cruel words, had frightened 2 small children who were guilty of nothing. He had become exactly the kind of person he had always despised. Someone who took out his pain on weaker people. Someone cruel, someone without compassion. My God, what have I done? What have I become? He whispered, and finally, the tears came again. Raymond slid down the door until he was sitting on the cold floor, knees bent against his chest, head down. He cried as he hadn't cried since everything began. He cried for the cruelty he had just committed. He cried for Evelyn, who would be ashamed of him if she knew what he had done. She had always been kind, had always helped when she could, had always taught that no matter how difficult your own problems were, there was always someone worse off. And what had he done? He had yelled at someone in a worse situation, much worse. At least he still had hope, as small as it might be. Evelyn was still alive, still fighting. But Mary had nothing. No hope, no resources, just 2 children depending on her and nowhere to go. And he had thrown her out, had refused to give food that was going to be thrown away anyway. Food that was worth nothing to him, but would mean everything to her. Evelyn will never forgive me for this. I will never forgive myself for this, he said to the emptiness, his voice broken and hoarse. Minutes turned into hours. Raymond sat there on the grocery store floor, leaning against the door, lost in his dark thoughts. The bank representative knocked on the door at some point, asking if everything was okay, but Raymond just nodded yes without getting up. The man eventually left, saying he would return the next day to seal everything for good. Raymond didn't care. Let them seal it. Let them sell it. Let them do whatever they wanted. None of it mattered anymore. When the sun began to set and the grocery store was plunged into shadows, Raymond finally stood up. His legs were numb from being in the same position for so long. He took the box with his personal belongings from the office and went out through the back door, not wanting to pass by the front again and risk seeing more neighbors who would judge him. He walked to the bus stop in the dusk twilight, feeling the weight of every glance he imagined was upon him. Everyone knows now. Everyone saw the kind of man I've really become, he thought, getting on the bus back to the specialized center. The journey back was even longer than the one going. Raymond sat in the back of the nearly empty bus, the box of belongings on his lap, looking out the window without really seeing anything. His mind couldn't stop replaying the scene. Mary's frightened eyes, the children's crying, the cruel words he had shouted. How could he have been so cruel? How could he have let his own pain transform him into a monster? Evelyn would never have done this. Even being hungry, without money, without resources, she would never have refused to help someone in need. She always found a way, always shared what little she had. It was one of the things he loved most about her, that unwavering kindness. And he had betrayed that, had betrayed her. How will I look at her now? How will I hold her hand knowing what I did? He thought, closing his eyes tightly. But he had no choice. He had to go back. He had to be by her side, no matter how much he hated himself in that moment. When he finally arrived at the specialized center, it was already night. The building lights shined in the darkness, a beacon of technology and medicine amid the quiet neighborhood. Raymond entered, showed his ID at reception, and went straight to the ICU. The nurse at the nursing station recognized him and nodded, indicating there were no changes in Evelyn's condition. He nodded, grateful and relieved at the same time. At least she was still alive. At least there was still a chance. He washed his hands, put on a mask, and entered room 3. And there she was, exactly as he had left her. Motionless, pale, connected to the same machines. But to Raymond, she seemed different now. Not because she had changed, but because he had. He approached the bed slowly, leaving the box with his belongings on the floor, and took her hand. "I did something terrible today, love. Something you would never have done. Something you would be ashamed of me for doing," he said, his voice breaking. Raymond told her everything, even knowing she couldn't hear, even knowing she was in a deep coma, he told her. He told her about Mary coming to the grocery store, about her asking for expired food, about how he had exploded, shouted, cruelly expelled her, about the judgmental looks from the neighbors, about the shame he felt now, so deep it seemed to be eating away at his soul. "I've become someone I don't recognize. The pain has turned me into a monster, and I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to go back to being who I was before," he said, tears falling onto her hand that he was holding. "But I promise I'll try. When you wake up, and you will wake up, I promise I'll be the man you deserve. I'll fix what I broke, I'll apologize, I'll do the right things. For you. For us," he said, kissing her cold hand. "Please, wake up. I need you to wake up and show me how to be human again," he whispered. The night passed in silence except for the constant sounds of the medical equipment. Raymond slept a few hours in the uncomfortable chair, but his sleep was restless, full of nightmares where Mary and her children chased him, their faces marked by the hunger and fear he had caused. He would wake up startled, check on Evelyn, then fall asleep again, only for the cycle to repeat. When morning finally came, bringing soft light through the small window, Raymond felt more tired than when he had lain down. A nurse came in to check Evelyn's vital signs, and he took the opportunity to go to the bathroom and wash his face. He looked at himself in the mirror and barely recognized the man he saw there. Deep dark circles, several days' stubble, red and swollen eyes. He seemed to have aged 10 years in a week. "I need to pull myself together. I need to be strong. For her," he said to his reflection, but didn't believe his own words. Raymond left the bathroom and returned to Evelyn's room, but one of the nurses intercepted him in the hallway. It was the same woman who had been kind to him in the first days. "Mr. Raymond, there's a call for you at reception." "It's urgent," she said, and his heart sank. Urgent was never good. Was it from the bank? More problems? He thanked her and went to reception, where the attendant handed him the phone. "Hello?" he said, holding the device with a trembling hand. It was the bank representative. "Mr. Raymond, I'm at the grocery store to do the final sealing before the auction, but there's something strange happening here. You need to come." "Now," the man said, his voice confused. "What happened? Did someone break in? Did they steal something?" asked Raymond, alarmed. "It's not that, just you need to come see. I can't explain over the phone," said the man, and hung up before Raymond could ask anything else. Raymond stood holding the silent phone, completely confused. What could be happening at the grocery store that the man couldn't explain? And why did he need to be there? The grocery store was going to be auctioned anyway. What else mattered? But curiosity and concern won out. Maybe someone really had broken in. Maybe there had been vandalism. He needed to at least know what was happening. He quickly returned to Evelyn's room, kissed her forehead, promised to return soon, and left the specialized center once more. The bus trip was torturous, his mind spinning with possibilities. When he finally got off at the stop near the grocery store and walked the 3 blocks to Flower Street, he saw that there was a small group of people gathered in front of the establishment. Neighbors, acquaintances. Everyone seemed to be looking inside through the shop window. What's happening here? He thought, quickening his pace. When Raymond approached, people turned to look at him, but unlike the day before, there was no judgment in their faces. There was something different, something he couldn't identify. Respect, admiration. It didn't make sense. The bank representative saw him and came to meet him immediately. "Mr. Raymond, thank God you came. I didn't know what to do. They've been here since early morning, saying they have permission. But I can't let anyone in without your authorization," said the man, gesturing confusedly. "Who's here? What are you talking about?" asked Raymond, completely lost. The man didn't answer, just pointed to the grocery store door. "See for yourself," he said, handing the keys to Raymond. With trembling hands and racing heart, Raymond took the keys and walked to the door. Through the glass he could see movement inside, several people. But doing what? He unlocked the door, pushed it open, took a step inside, and was completely paralyzed. The grocery store was transformed, completely transformed. The floor that was dirty and dusty now was clean, shining as it hadn't shone in years. The shelves that were almost empty now were full of products, food, cleaning supplies, everything perfectly organized. There were boxes piled in corners with more donations. And flowers. There were vases with flowers in the windows, fresh flowers that brought color and life to the space that had been dead. Raymond blinked several times, thinking he was hallucinating, that fatigue and stress had finally broken his mind. But no, it was real. All of that was real. And then he saw the people. There were at least 15 or 20 people working. Neighbors he recognized, the elderly lady who always bought eggs, the young man who worked at the mechanic shop on the street next door, the family that lived on the corner, all working, cleaning, organizing, fixing. And there, in the midst of everyone, was Mary, with her 2 small children beside her holding cleaning cloths. What is this?" Raymond managed to say, his voice coming out in an incredulous whisper. Mary heard his voice and turned around. When her eyes met his, Raymond saw that there was no anger there. There was no resentment for what he had done the day before. There was only that same compassion that had been there when she came asking for food. She dropped the cloth she was holding and walked slowly towards him, her nervous hands twisting the front of her blouse. When she was a few steps away from him, she stopped. "Mr. Raymond, I hope you don't mind that we're here. I know we don't have official permission, but I thought... After yesterday, I thought a lot about what you said," she began, her voice soft but firm. Raymond just looked at her, still unable to process what he was seeing. Mary continued, "You said you had lost everything, that your wife was fighting for her life, that you had nothing left, and I realized something. I was so focused on my own pain, my own hunger, that I didn't see your pain," she said, and tears began to form in her eyes. "You've always been so good to me, always helped me when you could, gave me discounts when I didn't have money, treated me with dignity when no one else did. And when you needed it most, I came asking for more. I'm sorry for that," she said, and Raymond felt something break inside him. Mary wiped away her tears and continued, her voice growing stronger. "But then I thought, you took away my bread when I begged, but I won't take away your dignity. I won't let you sink alone when I can do something, even if it's small," she said, gesturing to the transformed grocery store around them. "I went door to door yesterday afternoon, told everyone what had happened. Not to make you look bad, but to explain that you are suffering, that you need help. And surprisingly, people listened, People cared, she said, and a small smile appeared on her tired face. Everyone contributed what they could. Food, cleaning supplies, time, work. And we came here in the early morning and started. We cleaned everything, organized everything, filled the shelves with donations, because you deserve a second chance. We all do, she said, and her voice was choked now. God bless you, Mr. Raymond, you and your wife. May she recover and come home. And when she does, she'll have a place to come back to, she said, and finally the tears fell freely. Raymond stood there, completely still, Mary's words echoing in his mind like distant bells. He looked around the transformed grocery store, seeing for the first time the details he had missed in the initial shock. Each shelf was carefully organized, the products perfectly aligned. The floor shone under the light coming in through the newly cleaned windows. The flowers in the windows brought vibrant colors he hadn't seen there in years. And the people. So many people working, smiling, talking quietly while continuing to organize the donations. Neighbors he had known for decades but rarely spoke to beyond polite greetings, all there, working for free. For him. For someone who had been cruel the day before. For someone who didn't deserve that kindness. He felt his legs weaken, the weight of everything falling on him like an avalanche. His vision blurred with tears that began to flow uncontrollably. I don't understand. Why did you do this? After what I did yesterday? After how I treated Mary? He managed to say, his voice breaking with each word. Mary stepped forward and gently placed her hand on Raymond's arm, a gesture of compassion he felt he didn't deserve. She looked directly into his eyes, and there was only kindness there, no trace of resentment or hurt. Mr. Raymond, you were suffering. You are still suffering. People in pain do things they normally wouldn't do. Say things they normally wouldn't say, she said, her voice soft but firm. I could have been angry. I could have held a grudge. But then I thought about my own situation. When my husband died, I was also destroyed. I also said and did things I regret. Pain transforms us temporarily, but it doesn't define who we are, she continued, squeezing his arm lightly. And I know who you are. You're the man who always treated me with dignity when I had nothing. You're the man who discreetly gave me discounts when you saw I didn't have enough money. You're the man who once gave free food to my children when I was crying at the counter because I couldn't feed them that week, she said. And Raymond felt the tears run faster down his face as he remembered that day. Raymond covered his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking with sobs he could no longer control. All the tension, all the fear, all the guilt he had been carrying for the past few days finally found a way out. He cried right there in the middle of the grocery store, surrounded by people who were doing for him something he hadn't been able to do for himself. They were showing compassion when he had shown cruelty. They were offering hope when he had lost all of his. Mary moved closer, and in a gesture that surprised even herself, hugged Raymond. He was taller, stronger, but at that moment he seemed as fragile as a child. The others in the grocery store stopped working, observing the scene in respectful silence. Some also had tears in their eyes. It's okay. You're not alone. No one should go through something like this alone, said Mary, and Raymond felt something inside him heal with those simple words. After a few minutes that seemed like an eternity, Raymond finally managed to compose himself enough to pull away from the embrace. He wiped his face with the back of his hands, embarrassed for breaking down like this in front of everyone, but no one seemed to judge him. On the contrary, the faces around showed only understanding and sympathy. Mary waited until he was ready before continuing to speak. She reached into the pocket of her worn jeans and pulled out a thick white envelope. She extended it to Raymond with both hands, as if it were something precious. This is from all of us. From the entire neighborhood. When I told them about your situation, about your sick wife, about the expensive treatment she needs, people wanted to help, she said, shaking the envelope slightly when Raymond didn't immediately take it. Come on, take it. It's yours. It's for your wife, she said with an encouraging smile. Raymond looked at the envelope with fear, as if it could burn him. I can't accept money from people. You've already done so much. You cleaned the grocery store, brought donations. It's too much. It's too much for me, he said, shaking his head. Mary took a step closer, practically placing the envelope in his hands. Mr. Raymond, it's not charity. It's solidarity. It's community. It's people helping people because it's the right thing to do, she said, her voice becoming firmer, almost insistent. Inside this envelope, there's enough to cover a few more sessions of your wife's treatment. It's not everything she'll need, but it will help. And there's more. She paused, her eyes shining with a mixture of pride and emotion. We raised enough money to pay off the grocery store's mortgage with the bank, all of it. You don't owe anything anymore. The grocery store is yours again, free of debt, she said, and saw Raymond's eyes widen in absolute shock. He looked at the envelope in his trembling hands, then at Mary, then at all the neighbors around who were watching with hopeful smiles. This isn't possible. It can't be. The debt was too high. How did you manage? He began, but his voice failed. An elderly lady whom Raymond recognized as the owner of the bakery a few streets down approached, wearing an apron still covered in flour. She had participated in the cleaning and organizing as well, despite her advanced age. Mr. Raymond, you have no idea how many lives you've touched over the years, how many times you let someone take food on credit when they had no money. How many times you helped people without expecting anything in return, she said, her voice hoarse but full of conviction. I myself remember when my grandson was sick and I had no money for medicine. You gave me everything I needed from the grocery store for a whole week for free, without asking when I would pay. You just said I should take care of the boy. Do you remember that? She asked, and Raymond shook his head, tears returning to his eyes. He didn't remember. He had helped so many people over the years that individual cases blended in his memory. Well then, I never forgot. And when Mary came to my door yesterday telling about your situation, I knew it was time to give back. And it wasn't just me. It was everyone. Every person in this neighborhood contributed what they could, said the lady, pointing to the people around. A young man who worked at the mechanic shop stepped forward, his hands still dirty with grease, because he had come straight from work to help. Mr. Raymond, you gave me my first job when I was 15. You taught me about responsibility, about honesty, about treating people with respect. You were like a father to me when my own father wasn't present, he said, his voice choked. I convinced the owners of all the businesses on the street to contribute, and they all did. No one hesitated, because we all know who you are. A good man going through an impossible time, he said, and Raymond had to sit in one of the nearby chairs, because his legs simply couldn't support him anymore. He looked at the envelope in his hands, then at all those people who had gathered to save him when he needed it most. The weight of guilt he had been carrying began to mix with something lighter. Gratitude, renewed hope. I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you. After what I did yesterday, he began, but Mary interrupted him. Mary knelt in front of the chair where Raymond was sitting, placing herself at eye level with him. She took his hand, still holding the envelope between hers. Yes, you do deserve it. You deserve it because you're human, because you make mistakes, but you also get things right. Because you have flaws, but you also have qualities. Because yesterday you were broken, but today you're being rebuilt, she said with intensity. I forgave you the very second I left here crying yesterday. Do you know why? Because I saw in your eyes that you weren't shouting at me. You were shouting at the pain, at the fear of losing your wife, at the injustice of everything that was happening. I was just in the way, she said, squeezing his hands. So stop punishing yourself. Take this money. Save your wife. Save your grocery store. Save yourself. And afterwards, when all this is over, you can help me back. You can give me a job here when you reopen. You can teach me how to run a business. You can give me the chance I never had, she said. And finally a small but genuine smile appeared on her face. That way everyone wins. You help me, I help you. That's how community works, she said, and Raymond finally nodded. Raymond leaned forward and did something he never imagined he would do. He knelt on the floor right there in front of everyone, his head bowed in a gesture of absolute humility. The people around fell silent, surprised. He was still holding the envelope with one hand, but the other was on the floor supporting his weight. When he spoke, his voice came out clear despite the tears. Mary, I ask for forgiveness. From the bottom of my heart, I ask forgiveness for what I said yesterday, for the cruel words, for shouting at you and scaring your children, for putting my pain above yours when yours was as real as mine. I was wrong. Completely wrong, he said, raising his eyes to face her. And I ask forgiveness from all of you too. for having closed myself so much in my own problems that I forgot I was part of a community, that I wasn't alone, that there were people who cared, he said, looking around at all the faces that observed him with compassion. I promise I will earn this second chance. I promise that when Evelyn returns, and she will return, we will make this grocery store a place that serves the community in the way you deserve. And Mary, I won't give you a job. I'll make you my partner. Because you've taught me more about humanity in 2 days than I've learned in my entire life, he said, and saw Mary's eyes fill with tears again. Mary helped Raymond get up from the floor, and this time it was the neighbors who began to applaud. The sound was soft at first, hesitant, but it grew until it filled the entire grocery store. Raymond looked around, seeing smiling faces, wet eyes, heads nodding in approval. He had come here expecting only to collect the last remnants of his old life, but instead he had found the beginning of a new life, a life where he wasn't alone, where his pain was shared and his hope was multiplied. The bank representative, who had been watching everything from the door with a confused expression, finally approached. Mr. Raymond, I don't fully understand what's happening here, but if you really have funds to pay off the mortgage, I need to see proof and process the papers, he said, back to his professional tone. But even he seemed touched by what he had witnessed. Raymond looked at the envelope in his hands, then at the man. I do, and we'll resolve this right now because I have a wife waiting for me, and the sooner I resolve this, the sooner I can return to her, he said with renewed determination. Mary stepped forward and hugged Raymond once more. Go to your wife now, Mr. Raymond. She needs you, and when she gets better, we're here waiting. The grocery store is ready. The community is ready. We're a family now, she said with a warm smile. Raymond nodded, wiping the last tears from his face, and left with the bank representative to resolve the paperwork. 2 hours later, with all documents signed and the mortgage officially paid off, Raymond quickly returned to the grocery store just to say goodbye before returning to the hospital. But when he reached the door, his cell phone rang. It was from the specialized center. His heart raced as he answered with trembling hands. Hello? He said, preparing for the worst. Mr. Raymond, this is Dr. Keaton. You need to come to the hospital immediately. It's about your wife, said the serious voice on the other end, and before Raymond could ask anything else, she continued. Come now, please. The call dropped. Raymond was paralyzed for a second, then began to run. Mary shouted behind him, asking what had happened, but he didn't stop to answer. He caught the first taxi he saw, begging the driver to go as fast as possible. Throughout the journey, his heart pounded in his chest, his mind spinning with terrible possibilities. Please no, not now, not after everything, he thought repeatedly. When he arrived at the hospital, he ran through the corridors to the ICU. He passed through the double doors without even washing his hands or getting a mask, something that was normally mandatory. A nurse tried to stop him, but he went straight past. He reached the door of room 3, his heart in his throat, and pushed the door forcefully, and stopped. There was Evelyn, sitting in the bed, conscious, eyes open, looking directly at him. The breathing tube had been removed. She was pale, weak, but awake, really awake. Raymond, she said, her voice hoarse but the most beautiful thing he had ever heard. Raymond crossed the room in 3 strides and wrapped her in his arms, careful not to hurt her, but unable to control himself. He cried on her shoulder like a child, all the fear, all the pain, all the anguish of the past few days coming out at once. You came back to me, he managed to say between sobs. Dr. Keaton was in the corner of the room, smiling. She woke up an hour ago, and Mr. Raymond, the tests show something extraordinary. The treatment worked, the disease is in complete remission. She will recover fully, she said, wiping a tear from her own face. In the months that followed, Evelyn recovered completely. When she was discharged and returned home, she found the grocery store transformed and met Mary, whom she embraced like a sister. Thank you for saving my husband when I couldn't, Evelyn said, and Mary just smiled. The grocery store reopened as Raymond, Evelyn, and Mary, family grocery. Mary worked as a partner, her children always nearby, now healthy and happy. The establishment became more than a business. It became the heart of the community, where every week they distributed food to families in need. A year later, at the grocery store's anniversary party, Raymond made a toast. "A year ago, I almost lost everything. But I learned that when you fall, a community can lift you up. That kindness is stronger than anger. That miracles happen through good people doing good things," he said, looking at Evelyn and Mary. And there in that small grocery store filled with love, laughter, and hope, everyone understood that they had found something more valuable than money. They had found family. They had found purpose. They had found that together, they could overcome anything. Raymond and Evelyn worked side by side with Mary every day, building not just a thriving business, but a legacy of kindness. Mary's children grew up healthy, studied with scholarships that the community helped secure, and always remembered that one day their mother had nothing to eat, but good people changed everything. The grocery store became a reference in the neighborhood, known not for its prices but for its heart. Every Friday, Raymond would look around the establishment full of customers, hear the laughter, see Evelyn smiling at the counter, see Mary teaching her children about honesty and work, and he would be grateful. Grateful for having learned life's most important lesson. The acts of kindness we do come back multiplied when we least expect it. The good he had done for Mary years ago came back to save him in his darkest moment. And now together, they passed this kindness forward, creating an endless cycle of love, hope, and second chances for everyone who crossed the door of that small grocery store that had become a home. Now tell me in the comments where you're from and tell me, did you like this story? Then subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and check out the next one that's waiting for you here on the screen. I'll see you there.